Digital Impact Square Tata Consultancy Services, and also Dazriq, the entrepreneur in residence from SEEd.Lab, and the strategic initiative consultant at Tata Consultancy as well. Right? So, shall we start?
Yeah.
All right. So maybe before we start, let's have a show of hands for our audience. How many people here are from a social enterprise? I see a show of hands. Wow. Most of you. That's great. How many people here are from corporate organizations? Okay, we have 3, 4. And how many here are from government, foundations, or non-profit organizations? None, all right. So we have quite the array of audience here today. So today we have founders from SEEd.Lab and also aspiring entrepreneurs to corporates and the ecosystem of SEEd.Lab joining us. And my hope is that by the end of this session, everyone will be able to walk away with practical insights on how to build and scale an impactful venture. All right, so let's jump straight into it. I'd like to start with the topic of social ventures. First of all, Samir, maybe you'd like to take this. What exactly is Digital Impact Square and why was it started?
Thanks, Alice, and good afternoon to all of you who have taken time to be here. I represent an organization called Digital Impact Square. We are a not-for-profit organization based out of Nashik. Nashik is a small city of about 2 million people to the north of Mumbai. It's about 3 hours from Mumbai. And we have been running a social incubation program called Digital Impact Square since 2016. So this is our 10th year, and we run cohorts where we take problems worth solving in the social sector. We get passionate individuals or teams who want to solve problems in the social sector, and then we spend up to 18 months supporting them in that journey to go from what we call as a social impact innovator to a social impact entrepreneur. So that's essentially what we're doing. We have so far supported more than 40 startups that have been incubated, and collectively they have impacted the lives of more than 7 million people in India and in other parts of the world.
Thank you, Samir. That's how about you? Maybe you would like to share just a little bit more than what Shira shared earlier on SEEd.Lab, the work that we've been doing here.
So, very briefly, and maybe before that, also I'll share a bit about myself and how I got into this. So I've straddled a bit in the corporate space, social entrepreneurship space, founder space, almost everything in I guess what I could get money into terms of entrepreneurship development, I was there. Specifically for SEEd.Lab, beyond that, I'm also part of Tata Consulting Services in Malaysia, focusing specifically on what we call arguably we call it corporate social innovation portfolio. So what that means is actually if we could help corporate make more impact, right? Whether through their CSR or evolving the way they do CSR is something that we wanted to do, especially with the government companies of Malaysia. One of those portfolios is actually SEEd.Lab. Right? So the whole idea of SEEd.Lab, I think it was incepted in 2019, and it's modeled against Digital Impact Square. Whereby at that point of time, the downstream business of Petronas wanted to say, hey, look, how do we create more impact? Not just CSR, but take it as a business unit initiatives or agenda, right? And the whole intent behind it was actually to see if we can support larger Malaysian beyond, I guess, the Petronas stuff to actually amplify impact. And one way of doing it is through social entrepreneurship. Fast forward about 6-7 years later, where we are at now, we have done about 4 cohorts, ranging from youth unemployment, struggling single mothers, economic growth, empowerment, healthcare education. And we've seen that whole social impact spectrum have kind of evolved. What that means is actually now we look into more, I guess, complex social problems when we talk about, autism, for example, aged care, things around speech delay, for example, right? So this evolution of social impact is is something that I think SEED.Lab contact will also champion beyond the incubation, exploration, and so that, and see how we could actually help these ideas of social entrepreneurs and social impact to market. But yeah, that is essentially what SEED.Lab is about, trying to create more social impact through social entrepreneurship with the move of the current market of money.
So I think seeing as SEED.Lab and Digital Impact Square has been doing a lot of impactful work in this realm, and you've mentioned a lot, Daz, about the term social entrepreneurship. So how exactly would you define social entrepreneurship, and what makes social enterprises important to society today?
I think kalau dalam bahasa Melayu ni, I like to put it like berniaga sambil beramal. Basically, you mean you do business, but also for, I guess, good deeds, right? If you ask me in any type of social entrepreneurship, irrespectively whether it's Malaysia, India, Korea, there's only three components, right? One is actually you have to have a business model. Fundamentally, that is your sort of business. Otherwise, it's actually become an NGO or charity body. You might not be profit making at the start, but as long as you have a revenue model, that will actually consider this as business. That's number one. Number two is actually for the purpose of your setup of your business must have an area of impact that you want to solve for society, arguably for environment as well, right? So that's kind of the two element of what makes a social enterprise as a business element, but as also a social impact element. The third one, which I think is also as equally important for the first two, is actually what exactly in that impact that you want to do. What that means is that if I'm looking at doing an education, for example, what exactly in the education space I want to do? Simply because it will gives you the means to measure that impact, right? Because if you talk about education, it's very broad. But is it access to education? Is it quality of education? And I think that is important because then you know whether you're making real impact for your business or you're just saying it for the sake of vanity in that sense.
Yeah, so I think social enterprise, maybe try and paraphrase it. So social enterprise runs on a commercial model that aims to create impact for its stakeholders rather than profit for its shareholders. At the end of the day, because everybody can argue that every enterprise has a social impact, it creates employment, yes, right? But if the motive or the intent is to create profit for shareholders, that's a commercial enterprise. The motive is to create impact for the stakeholders, it's a social enterprise, right? And because of this model, you use profits to further the cause of impact and not to enhance the wallet of the shareholder, right? So a lot of almost all such social enterprise, we work with a lot of social startups. Almost all their profit goes back into the business and not necessarily as fat bonuses or salaries for the co-founders or for the investors. So I think that's a major distinction that needs to be made. But yes, they all need to have a commercial mindset, right? So not rely only on grants, but also significant revenue.
Thank you. Connecting back onto that, talking about the stakeholders versus shareholders, are there any misconceptions that people have when building a social enterprise? There's a lot of founders here today, maybe this topic might be quite interesting. And also if there's any case studies or examples that you've come across where there are lessons that are worth learning from, maybe you'd like to share?
Yes, there are quite a few examples of, so one of the misconceptions is that you should not seek profit, right? So that's a misconception. Second is most social enterprises, most people who are benefiting from a social enterprise are not willing to pay, right? Because you're addressing, poor farmer. I mean, again, that's not true. What we have realized is that there is sufficient value that you're giving, people are willing to pay. Right? So the focus should be on value rather than affordability. I mean, affordability does come into play, but it's also a function of value. There are, we ourselves, as I mentioned, have more than 40 startups who work in this space, assisted tech, agri, education, healthcare. A lot of, so just if it makes sense, 3 of our startups, social startups, have been invited to Shark Tank India. Right? In fact, they were so impressed, the sharks were so impressed, these are all high achievers in the Indian business setup, that they now have created a separate season for social ventures. Right? And it's that kind of an impact. So there are quite a few, and these are all startups who are built the same way. What's your model looking like? Where does your revenue come from? How do you intend to use the investment, all those things. So I think the misconception that a social enterprise cannot be profitable, the misconception that social enterprise only works on grants, is a myth that we have broken multiple times. And all the 3 startups that we presented that came from Digital Impact Square onto the Shark Tank, all 3 received investment of us, right? Which also means that there is sufficient opportunity even for investors, because by their very nature, the number of people who are impacted is usually very high. So if you crack the business model, the opportunity is significant as well. So I think those are the myths and the misconceptions that have slowly but surely been broken, at least in India.
I think you're right. I think I will stick on your misconception as well. But I think in Malaysia we're not there yet in comparable to India. And I think because people like to fit social enterprise into a label, which makes it hard because it's, to be honest with you, it's a gray in between profitability between charity, right? And because of that, whether you're a VC or a government, you tend to fit into one or the other. There's nothing in between, which makes it hard for Malaysian social entrepreneurs to thrive in that commercial sense. And what I mean by that is that, let's take tax, for example. I think for most of you, I know, no tax benefits in Malaysia for social enterprise is modeled against charity, which is not very suitable in this way for social enterprise, right? But also, if you're looking at a very extreme VC lens, you're looking at 5x, 10x growth in a short period of time, which also may not be suitable for social entrepreneurship or social enterprise to scale up, right, in that sense. But I think we're moving that needle a bit by bit, right? Because now you see a lot of investments or private money say, oh yeah, look, I understand you're not making as much money, but as long as this thing around your ESG push, SDG push, we try, right? Even from government side, whether it's through the agencies or the ministry itself, they are also evolving the way they are trying to accreditize social entrepreneurship in that sense, right? So I agree, I think we'll move into where you are at, but at this point of time, it's a bit of a struggle to fit in social entrepreneurship into either commercial or charity.
Thank you. So, as we've touched investors, grants, for example, to build capital, and where does social enterprise sit on the spectrum of commercial business versus impactful charitable work? Maybe we would like to know what kind of support does social enterprises actually need to develop and to scale, for example. Is it the same as a traditional business, or is it a totally different set of needs that they would need to be supported by different kinds of organizations or different kinds of subject matter experts to be able to scale and grow?
Yeah, so I think the the adage or the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to raise a social enterprise. Okay. No social enterprise, none that we know of, we work with a lot of them, can become successful in isolation, right? They need a lot of ecosystem support, whether it's government, organizations working in that space, or corporates like us. They do not, as I said, they work in a very difficult space. If it was so commercially viable and attractive, some entrepreneur would have already picked up, and made a business out of it. But the fact that the problem remains indicates it's a very often a very complex problem to solve, and there are many stakeholders. So for a social enterprise to be successful, they need a lot of ecosystem support. And organizations like SEEd.Lab or us at DisQ, a lot of our effort actually goes into that, right? Building an ecosystem that can support a social enterprise, because they need, as you rightly said, they need mentorship, they need funding, they need access to the beneficiaries, they need government support. A lot of those things, most co-founders will never be able to do it on their own. So I think the single biggest value that we can give to any social enterprise is a strong enablement for ecosystem access. I think if we can manage that, a lot of other things can be done.
I'll jump on that as well, but I think I'm thinking about cohesiveness among the micro ecosystem. What that means is I feel, and this is for Malaysia specifically, I think there's a lot of support for early stage social entrepreneurs, whether it's through government, whether it's through programs like SEEd.Lab, maybe from ideation to commercialization. But I think what is lacking is actually what I call the mezzanine stage of social entrepreneurs. What that means is that once the early stage social entrepreneurs have received all of the support, whether it's through SEEd.Lab or InScan or whatever programs out there, right? How do you actually help them to go to market faster or build their capabilities to go to market, whether it's through procurement readiness, scale up readiness, and stuff like that. One example, hypothetical example that I could give, right? And this needs private and public sector collaboration, so right? We know that there's a funneling of early stage social entrepreneurs, and they are going through all these programs, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, and stuff like that, right? But if you're a private sector, if you're a government, and you need to be strategic and forward thinking about this, Malaysia, I think most of you know, right? I think next year Malaysia will host the SEA Games 2027, right? If I'm smart enough, whether I'm private sector or public sector, if I'm the Ministry of Youth and Sports, right, I'd be starting to think about, can I carve out a social procurement for these up and coming social enterprises so that I can procure for the SEA Games, right? And that requires private sector like EDC, like National Red Square, to get these social entrepreneurs ready to be pretty much procured or commercialized ready, right? And I think that's where the gap is, because everyone kind of doing their own thing. Yes, I know there's different challenges in terms of the risk factor, investment factor, and capability factor, but I think that is where, when Simon talk about ecosystem, right, I'm thinking about ecosystem maturity to really help every stage of social entrepreneurs so that we can thrive that ecosystem, that dynamic will be better.
Definitely. I mean, touching the topic of corporates being one of them that can support and help social entrepreneurs. I think one good question here today, because we do have some representatives from corporate organizations, how can they differentiate between the social enterprise? How can they identify a social enterprise compared to charitable work or nonprofits? What can they look for?
It's a tough one, and depending on where you sit in the business organization, to be honest with you, that's what historically is, and depends on your mandate, right? So, for example, that if I'm residing in a marketing business unit, right, and have a cost that I need to expend for a certain campaign for this, potentially it's easier for me to maybe reach to a social enterprise But I have my colleagues in procurement or finance that I need to, to get him on board, right? And it's a tough act, although you like to support this social enterprise mission and stuff like that, but that's his SOP that I need to follow through or either my colleagues to follow through. Often where I see there's, and I call it loosely corporate adoption, or rather corporate procurement, is actually the champion itself is actually the C-level, or rather the CEOs, right? Which means that he or she will either give a mandate to say, okay, this is special incentive, special cover, that we will actually try to maybe work, partner, or buy from social enterprise, and maybe not just from a campaign project, but maybe a slightly longer initiative in that sense. Yeah, the reality is it's harder, but I think as long as you have a champion that will actually advocate for this impact of social enterprise, I think it's easy to grow. I'm pretty sure that's more examples in India.
No, I think the challenge in most corporates in this is we do a lot of conversations with a lot of leaders, both within the Tata Group, a very huge organization, and also leaders who come from other parts of other companies. Is corporates in general are more comfortable funding projects. Right? So you have a project, it has a fixed start time, it has a fixed deadline, you have certain number of impact numbers that you can deliver. It's easier to kind of understand that, it's easier to justify that, it's easier to fund that. Investing in a startup is on the opposite spectrum. So there's no kind of, I can't time box it because the startup itself is maybe in that. There are constraints in terms of, as you said, SOPs, compliances, all that, right? And generally the impact is exponential. Right? So startups usually start small. And so for everybody, what we have seen is, just to give you an example, the first we saw only I think less than 500 beneficiaries in our first year. In year one of DISQ, the startups that are working were able to kind of help only 500, and in the 10th year, they are now at 7 million. Which CSR program will give you this kind of, right? But if I just sat there and said only 500 people are impacted, let's stop this. So I think it's more of a mindset that corporates need to understand is that innovation is not instantaneous. Startup, social innovation, social enterprises don't have a linear growth trajectory. Once they reach a certain level, it kind of just explodes. So purely as if I'm a CSR or one of the C leaders or looking at finance, the amount of money that TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, has spent for CSR for Digital Impact Square, the per person impact number is far greater than if you had just funded one, corporate project for training, let's say 10,000 women, or it's far more than that. Right? So the value is significantly higher the longer you persist. And I think that's the barrier that we hope we can communicate. Petronas is seeing that as well. Right? In the fourth year, they already crossed 30,000 people, but if you look at the money spent, it's far less than if we had spent individually on CSR projects. So I think, and this continues, right? So long after the startups have moved out of SEED.Labs or Digital Impact Square, long after we have stopped funding them, they continue to make impact, and all those numbers do accrue back to us, right? Because we supported them. So sustainability, social enterprises give sustainability for impact, and I think that is unmatched in any other model that we have seen.
Right, thank you. Touching on that topic, how do founders, social enterprise founders, approach these corporates? What is the advice that you may have? Should they have a strong pilot, or should they come in with some understandings, specific understandings on how they should approach corporates to gain these partnership opportunities?
So what we have observed is there are different levels at which you can approach a corporate. For some, for example, one is what we call as the value system. So let's say there is a corporate that has a stated mission to empower, let's say, women. Right? So women empowerment is their core strategy, and we have a startup that is doing exactly that. We could actually approach them for a partnership to co-create the impact. Right? So they could then become partners in terms of funding or any of those things. The second type of partnership is becoming the first buyer. Right? So often, we all rely on evidence. So nobody wants to be that first risk taker. That is where a lot of startups struggle because they don't have a first big buyer, okay, whose logo can help them create impact. Sometimes just having a logo. So can you get a corporate or other corporate partners who would be willing to be the first buyer, even if it's a small, procurement, it's not a large procurement. Third is full-fledged procurement, as you said. The Petronas actually is a full-fledged procurement for SageMaker, which is one of the startups. So the revenue model significantly improves because of the Petronas actually buying products, not as a pilot, not as a. So there are these three types of opportunities that exist. One is, as I mentioned, primarily shared objectives. Right? The second is to get the logo to support them in getting the first customer testimonial. Then the second is purely as a commercial buyer of whatever products that are in product or services that the startup is offering.
Oh, it's always tough after going after something. No, it's fine, sir. I'll give a different, and it is very founder specific, which I think some of the core guys have kind of said about it. So, number one is whether you're a corporate looking for partners, whether you're a corporate partner or even investor, right? I think first thing first, I think people will see you as a founder first. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important in terms of authenticity, your passion and your drive, right? And the good news is I feel among the founders now, I think we can do a lot of networking and stuff like that. But as some of the co-founders have mentioned also, like how do you make yourself memorable is quite important as well. Right? They might not want to do partnership with you now, but if they remember you, right, whether through your open day tools and stuff like that, the chances are wanted to also keep in touch with you or be in touch with them, and at the point of time that you're ready, I think you can approach them or they will actually approach you. Right? So Sabri gives from a business perspective. I'm trying to give you a bit more personalized perspective in the sense of if you're a founder, yes, you have to be a bit green, you have to be a bit more, I guess, bold to some extent. But more importantly, is actually, you need to show your authenticity, you need to show that, yes, I'm doing it for the right reason. Hopefully that will come across in terms of how you deliver your message, your pitch and stuff like that. People will remember. One of the more practical advice I would give you guys is actually to try to do that. If you're not comfortable with that, at least try to. Because it does you good in the long run.
Talking about corporates being a buyer versus potential buyer of big logos, flipping the coin onto the perspective of corporate organizations themselves, how can corporate leaders better manage the perceived risk of working with a small business or working with a less established venture as they're starting up?
Since he wants to go first.
I think the most important, right? I think whether it's corporate or government or whether you're in partners, is actually I want to see value. And in terms of what value you will bring. And I'm not talking value in terms of dollars and cents specifically, but value in terms of what Shamil mentioned, right? I think whether they are value, actual values, or is it an alignment in terms of what they do as a business or also as an individual. Right? I'll give you a different lens in terms of one of the projects that TCS do with Malaysia Airlines, and I'm pretty sure the SEEd.Lab has is the cancer support, right? Although it's not social enterprise, but what we wanted to do is actually, can we get Malaysia Airlines to create value in a different sense of value, not dollars and cents, right? But to submit SEEDs now, you need to understand in terms of what's their alignment, what's their values, what's their mission and stuff like that, right? The only thing we know at that point of time, because we do a lot of work, or TCS do a lot of work with major airlines, we know in terms of their customer analytics. What that means is, on average, we know the domestic flight, there's about 15 to 20% ideal capacity in terms of seats, right? To KL, to Kedah, KL to Kelantan, on average, there's probably at least 5 or 6 seats that are empty. Now, there's no way, in the normal sense, you can turn that into dollars and cents value. Okay, like they'll do discounts or last minute tickets, whatever it is, right? But because we know the flight's going to fly anyway, can we use that? When I talk about value, is social impact. So what we know, what we did was, okay, we partnered with National Cancer Society of Malaysia. We said, look, there's a lot of cancer patients that are not in KL who can't access cancer treatment in time. Because when you come to KL, it's already stage 3, stage 4, and it's already quite late in that sense, right? So what we did, we said, okay, we'll build I call it low fidelity app, so that this cancer patient can monitor. Low fidelity means it's red, yellow, green, that's all. The moment it hits yellow or closer to amber red, right? We work out with Malaysia Airlines. Malaysia Airlines, can we do an exception handling, customer service, book the next the next seat on your available flight for this patient and caretaker to come to Kuala Lumpur to get immediate treatment. Now, the value there, what we say is, obviously we cannot charge, but we can actually create some sort of impact reporting throughout the year, how many cancer patients that you have supported, just by way of your flights are going to fly anyway, right? And so far, I think we reached about 3,200-ish cancer patients that Malaysia Airlines have supported, right? Now, because of that, they see values. Okay, cool, let's continue on supporting, right? So as an entrepreneur, you gotta be a bit more innovative in terms of, okay, how do I create more value to this partner, whether it's corporate or government, so that they can see, oh yeah, it's a win-win scenario. Yes, it's not dollars and cents, which most of investing is dollars and cents. But sometimes it's something else that they say, aha, this is great, I want to continue, right? So I think I use the word value very loosely, but I think as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of way you can sort of, illustrate that value and make it work.
Right. So, I think it's a fantastic example. As a corporate, I think when I wear I'm a mentor and on multiple hats. But what is a corporate most mindful about? They're mindful about their brand, right? So if you come with a proposition that they feel is risk to their brand, they will not go ahead with it. Okay? They are worried about compliance, so they execute something that is either against their own internal compliance or is potentially breaking a law that they have worked on. Again, that will not work. They are worried about funding, right? How much money they can put in, because they have justifications to make. So as one just said, what you need is, as an entrepreneur, be very smart, be mindful. Just because there is value and just because there is an impact, corporate typically set up as other concerns that may not be visible to co-founders. Right? So they're quick to label corporates as unsupportive. Rather than that, they could actually work with the corporate, saying what are your concerns? Like brand, these are my concerns. So there are always ways in which you can work with the corporate in addressing their concerns. Right? And often the concerns is not because they don't trust you or they don't want to create impact. There are considerations that you as a founder may not be aware of. So get a good champion from the corporate who is willing to spend time, explain to you, and then you come back with solutions saying, how about, maybe we don't use your brand, or let's not use it this way. There's a way to do it. Co-create opportunities and then move forward. So just as you as a co-founder are empathetic to your beneficiary and to the community, be empathetic to other stakeholders as well. So corporate is just, sometimes we even are quick to dismiss government, too bureaucratic and all that. But if you change the lens, they are also operating with a certain set of constraints. Don't see them as an adversary or somebody is the opposite. What if I change my mindset as a founder? So the government is also there, they're also wanting to help people. Let's come up with a language that works with it. Right? And then use that language to communicate and to bring them on board. It's a slow process, it's not very exciting, but when you crack it, it gives an amazing satisfaction because you are now able to suddenly scale much faster with that kind of support. Makes sense?
Great, thank you. I mean, just to summarize that very quickly, maybe founders should not be too skeptical and try to understand the needs and the worries of corporates before going into it first. Right? Now, I think I want to touch on something interesting that Daz has mentioned. He mentioned cancer support, which is one of the cancer support initiatives that TCS is doing with MAG and also National Cancer Society Malaysia. So how they're doing this is through technology, basically. It's through an app that they can use, is what Daz has mentioned. So maybe this is directed towards Samir first. How can social enterprises realistically also incorporate technology into their solutions?
So, just to let you know, we are called Digital Impact Square. Right? So, we start with the word digital, and impact is our middle name. So what we have realized is, so there are two types of opportunities for all startups. So there are certain startups where the tech is the heart of the innovation. So we're talking of AI models, we're talking of devices, medical devices, and stuff like that. But tech need not always be at the heart of innovation. Right? So a lot of our startups are not using necessarily high technology or deep technology, but they're using tech to scale. And I think as of now, there is nothing in the world that can help you scale as fast as technology. Right? So if you are not using technology, you are actually limiting your opportunity to scale. The other thing is technology is very, very affordable now, right? And really, really accessible, at least the internet, mobile phones, and all of those things. A startup, if it wants to scale, must figure out how to leverage technology. If your scale strategy is purely based on resource, and it's a linear model, you cannot scale. Right? So technology currently is the only way you can. So if I have a store and I hire 5 people to run that store, and I want to scale to 10 stores, I have to hire 50 people. It's a linear model, and I have to spend 5 times. If I have an e-commerce site that currently caters to 10 products, I can have thousands of products without adding a single penny to my cost. Right? So technology in that sense helps significantly in terms of scale. Now we have AI, it's a lot of buzzwords around AI as well. Now everybody's trying to figure out how AI can help. Has any startup figured it out? Yes, we do have some startups where AI is now part of the core offering, but it is more because it delivers value, not because it's a buzzword. Right? So we have startups that are using AI. We have a startup that is helping blind students learn, convert print into audio. AI is able to do it far more in multiple languages, right? So the translation, transcription. So they have just incorporated it, and it's certainly helped them phenomenally in terms of the value that they can give. So it's not a force fit. Unfortunately, a lot of startups tend to be force fit. AI may not be a force fit. So once again, it will not be at the heart of your innovation. It could be a 10x or 100x multiplier. Second is don't force technology in use cases where it is not needed because it adds to your cost. And third is a lot of our recommendation to startups to use tech is keep all the complexity of technology in the back end. That is something that is not visible to your user. Make the front end as simple as possible. So sometimes startups get so fascinated with adding complexity on the front end that users get put off very quickly. Right? So I think these are some of the things that if you keep in mind, I think technology can be a pretty great enabler.
I mean, just a quick one on reflection and talk about AI. I think I spoke to Kogan is one of our TCS tech guys who's also part of SEEd.Lab, right? When we started, I think in week 8 or month 2, there's a module on AI. Now, when I look at it, I think it's obsolete. 80% of what Google taught then is no longer. I mean, it's applicable, but it's not relevant in some way or sense. Right? And some of these guys are using codecs and all of it, which is different entirely. So I think I agree with what Sunny mentioned, but I think you need to take technology as an enabler. It is not as a core proposition, right? Because that tech stack or whatever you will have will actually change over time. But you need to at least be aware about that technology, understand it enough. You might not understand the whole entire thing, but that is as important as trying to decipher this whole thing about AI and tech and stuff like that. So when I say technology, it is not AI specifically, because we know, like farmers, I think we visit our alumni school Terra yesterday. Tech stack is different. We're not talking about AI, software, hardware, right? But it could be just piping system, pond, fish, fertilizer, and all of that, right? So to me, it's also technology, right? But I think, like I said, I think tech is just an enabler. It should not be front, left, right, center of everything that we do.
Thank you. Maybe besides Quintera, maybe Daz, you can take this one. Are there any other social enterprises from Malaysia that have successfully been leveraging technology or even AI in their solutions? And how can the founders here today find a practical way to incorporate technology if needed, as Samir mentioned, if needed, technology and AI?
It has more sample set. Malaysia is a smaller sample set. Start from India. I need to think the way.
So I think there are a lot of use cases. We have a startup that is working with parents and children with autism. And there are support groups, right? But the ratio of special educators to the number of children who need support is very skewed. This is where AI can come in. Right? It can fill a gap. Okay, it cannot. So I think the idea is, and this is I think a fundamental aspect of thought, is AI will not always be a replacement. I think a lot of the times we are getting confused that AI is going to replace. What we feel is AI is an augmenter. It augments what you're doing, but it allows you to do something better, faster. So we have a startup that, for those who are not aware, children who are requiring therapy support, autism, every child is different. So therapist creates what we call as individualized learning programs, ILPs, for every child. Usually they are 3-month programs with milestones, and the therapist, whether it's an occupational speech, they work together to execute them. Right? One of our startups has, through the digital platform, access to thousands of these ILPs that have been created by hundreds of therapists. What it does now is, let's say a new child has just been onboarded into the platform. The therapist enters the profile of the child, the age, what is the child struggling with, how long has the, what sort of condition on the spectrum. AI then looks at thousands of these learning plans that have been created by therapists across India and comes with a first cut of what it believes is a good lesson plan for a child. Right? It now gives that kind of a first cut lesson plan to the therapist. The therapist then views it and makes changes to this. Right? So now suddenly AI has enabled a therapist in a tier 2 city who may not have that kind of experience to get a lesson plan that has been created by some of the best therapists in one of the bigger cities. Right? And there is no way manually we could have done it, there is no way systems could have been intelligent enough. So that is an example of how AI is really helping. So now even an relatively inexperienced therapist gets a really good lesson plan to look at and to build from there. Right? So this is an example of using AI to create impact, not to replace the therapist, not to replace the lesson plans, but as a starting point, far more contextually relevant, far more mature lesson plan than the therapist himself or herself could have ever come up with. Right, so here's an example of what we are doing. I mentioned the visually impaired, we now have chatbots, very simple multilingual chatbots like AI. So AI now, to some extent, farmers use a lot of voice. Many farmers in India are not literate, so they know how to use WhatsApp. They can't read they can see the logo. They don't know how to read numbers, but they know the pattern, right? So they use mobile phones without being necessarily literate. Almost all their interaction on WhatsApp is through voice text. The voice side, another farmer will listen to it. Right? AI is not able to do that. It can listen to your voice. It can understand your accent. It is a rural folks with very strong accent. It can answer you back in that language with accent. Phenomenal, unheard of. 2 years back, if you had asked me, these models as a mentor, I would have rejected it, saying technology cannot do this. You need to put a person, put an IVR, have 3 people manning phone lines. Right? This is the transformation that we're looking at. Right? So farmer, for example, looking for advisor, is it going to rain tomorrow? Right? They say that, and AI goes in, looks at the weather reports, look at the micro reports, comes back in a language farmer understands it's good enough, and he then forwards it to their other process. Okay, saying, okay, I got this answer. This use case was not possible just 1 year back. Right? So we are getting many use cases, but none of these are force fitted. AI only works if the user feels it is delivered well. So a lot of examples like that, but yeah, this is in a nutshell the transformative power that we are seeing in front of our eyes. Startups that would have struggled with providing a solution a year back are now having hundreds of users. And it has not been a significant increase in cost for them.
Just a quick one. I was going through my Rolodex, so what should I share? 2 things, right? So one, I'll share more outside of SEED.Lab. May not be labeled as social enterprise in Malaysia, but some of you might have heard of Nak Mengaji.com. Nak Mengaji lah, Nak Mengaji. So it's similar, whereby it's really how you recite your Quran and stuff like that. So it's sort of AI empowered to see how effective, how good, how fluent you are in terms of your readability and all of that. Now it's not SE specifically, but that's an example of AI powered, and it's very B2C. I think it's almost like an open source, if I'm not mistaken, and their pricing is depending on your affordability in that sense. But as far as product centric goes, although I feel Malaysia adoption of these technologies are not there yet, I think SEED.Lab is at the cusp of building this type of solution. When you talk about our alumni of Akufish and Proladam, effectively it's a precision farming, right? When you talk about fish, and I think it was smart, just from a product standpoint, not commercialization yet, but product standpoint. Right? So the original idea was, how do I solve fish farmers' problem of not using not enough resources or overused resources. When I say resources, is fish feed lah, makanan ikan. Right? So what they do is actually they do AI image on the pond column, track every fish, and they are looking at what they call the NCR1. So 1 means it's an ideal. I can't remember what NCR is. You guys can know, I don't know, I can't remember. But the whole idea is actually you should just feed the fish 1. If it's more than that, meaning you have given the fish is fat. If it's less, then you can't go to market with the weight of that fish, right? Which I think is smart, because then you can say, okay, then maybe you're trying to help farmers to use just enough optimum resources so that they can go and sell the fish, stuff like that. Similarly to some of the ventures of SEED.Lab, right, where they talk about agri, pest detection, disease detection, and stuff like that, right? So it's all AI empowered to some extent. For as long as there's enough data sets, they can read all of that trends, right? What I'm caveat here is actually I feel in Malaysia, the ecosystem or the commercial bit of that technology is not there yet. maybe because of the digital adoption, maybe because of the demand, maybe because of whatever it is. Although the technology is great, but we believe that if the demand is not there, it's going to be tough in that sense, right? Although, and then I agree with something that I think it's not, AI or technology shouldn't be the centerpiece of everything. It should be an enabler, and that's probably where some of these cool ventures, which is AI enabled and stuff like that, are hard to find all this demand as of now. Maybe you can argue, say it's a bit ahead of their time, but I don't know. It is what it is. Yeah, but it's they're still working closely with the government, trying to see how we can get funding, maybe go outside of Malaysia, Thailand, and stuff like that to see if there's a market for it. But that's what it is.
Right. I mean, Malaysia may not be there just yet, but technology is always evolving, and in a blink of an eye, maybe by tomorrow, we'll be seeing something new. Every day we're seeing something new, so it's very important to be staying up to date with all of the updates in technology and see what can be useful to you as a founder or venture to use as a tool for you to enhance your solutions and enhance your services. For example, a lot of our founders here today are in the early stages of their startup, and I think the next thing that they would look into is scaling your business. So one question that I have is, what separates ventures that successfully progresses from those that remain stuck at the pilot stage for long?
Short one. I think it's really okay. And I'm saying this is really based on your individual personalities to some extent. I think how I always say to a lot of founders, like, what's your big, hairy, audacious goals? BHAG, right? Although sometimes they understood it, or I need to go big and whatever it is, but sometimes there are reasons why they are not pushing as hard in that sense, right? And if you're asking me, like, in practical terms, right? And I understood that because maybe you have families, maybe you have, commitments and stuff like that you need to juggle. Maybe, going out of your comfort zone is a bit too much of a risk in that sense. Right? And it's easy as, mentor, EIR to say, hey, why don't you do this? So that you can scale and stuff like that. But sometimes you gotta be a bit empathetic to some of why, right? And I think it's very easy for us to say, yeah, you should do this so that you can grow 3x, 5x, whatever it is. But in all honesty, I can't really answer that question with a certainty that there's a, one magic bullet, how do you solve that? But I think as long as you have this growth and entrepreneurial mindset, right? Because you're the one who process your business, you're the one who's driving your venture, you're the one who dictate because of how you grow, scale, progress, right? I think you're okay. And my mantra, and I shouldn't be saying this in front of DC or LP, for every progress, I feel it's still a form of success. Right? It's negative, positive, big or small, it's still success because you're trying something. But yeah, it's really up to you because we've tried. We've said many things to our previous alumni, say, why don't you do this? But in reality, there's reasons why they're not doing it. So that's also part of us, considerations of scaling up.
Yeah, so I think I'll be very blunt.
It has to.
The mindset and the skills required to go from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100 are different. Mindset and the skills go from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100 are different. Not all co-founders can transition to this. Okay? So there are certain co-founders who are extremely good when they're going from 0 to 1. They start struggling when you're going from 1 to 10, and they kind of just fizzle out when you have to go from 10 to 100. Okay? Which is essentially why you have exits. Right? Why do you have exits? Because the co-founder realizes my capability and skill can take my startup only to this point. Beyond it, it requires a mindset, resources, and thinking that I am not capable of. Right? Which is why we have exits. Why big companies, why small companies. Right? Are there founders who have bridged this gap? Yes. There are many founders who have bridged this gap. Airbnb. Example, you started with just two people. Google is an example. CEO is, for many years, continue to be the founders. But for a vast majority, the transition is not easy because you need different skills. When you go from 0 to 1, the focus is on product development, the focus is on initial pilots. 1 to 10 is when you start hiring people. You start getting into documentation, you start getting into legal hassles. Many co-founders get bored. This is not what I meant. So they kind of just get too, they feel, these are not your attractive parts. These are the boring bits. Okay, I'm excited in making something new, right? And from 10 to 100 is when you have, litigations coming, for example. Somebody will file an IP infringement. I mean, as you grow bigger, your competitor's size is also growing. Not every co-founder has the ability or the intention to handle that. So I think that is one of those reasons why scaling on its own by a co-founder is so difficult. Second is the inability or the unwillingness of the co-founder to delegate. So we have found that, they want, because they're so comfortable, so that in the 0 to 1, I can wear multiple hats. But as I grow, I need to delegate, I need to give responsibilities. Marketing is headed by somebody else, recruitment by somebody else, customer acquisition. But I want to do everything myself, so I burn out. And then that's where there are so many factors. I'm not even talking about resources or maybe your product itself is not scalable. So, of course, you're building a product that works well with your 1,000 users, and will completely break down when you have 10,000 users. But I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking at a much more fundamental level. Assuming all things are good, great product, you have a large user base. Often, a lot of startups struggle because the founder is not able to deal with that. Right? And therefore, that's the role, that's where mentors, coaches, the ecosystem becomes very important. That will form a support perspective. So sorry for being blunt, but
It is what it is. Gen Z says. Okay, so putting aside the mindset and the fundamentals of the founders of our ventures, what about balancing social impact, customer needs, and financial stability? Because this is the other side of the coin when it comes to these early stage startups as well, when they're trying to scale.
yeah, so we often get asked, I think there's a question somewhere below, is impact versus revenue, what comes first? Right. So the diplomatic answer is everything has to go hand in hand, obviously. So you can't have one without the other. But for a social enterprise, I think first and foremost is value. What is the value or the impact that you make? Without value, there is no business model. Without value, there is no revenue. Without value, there is no impact. Right? So how well do you understand value? Once you've understood the value, then you come up with business models, because business models evolve, right? And no founder should try to feed the hunger of others without ensuring that they themselves are not hungry. So we must always take care that I am fed first. I have to help myself first before I can help others. It's like when the oxygen mask falls. They say that first you put your oxygen mask, even though you have a kid that you love more than you have, and then choose your favorite kid, that comes, second. But first and foremost is make sure you have oxygen so that you are remaining sane and you have the ability to take care of others, right? So while yes, it is important that you create impact, while yes, it is important that there is value being created, you must, as a startup, always there should be one thread running in your head saying, how can I make this sustainable for myself? Right? Because if you are not if you are not healthy, you cannot, at least attempt to make others healthy. So it is in that sense for social enterprise. Yes, there are times when we say that for now let's not talk about the business model, let's focus on impact. But eventually, you must talk about self-sustainability, right? So there is no social enterprise if it is not sustainable. Sustainability comes from value. If I'm not delivering value, I can have all fancy tech, all great brand logos, all those things. People are not interested in using my product or services. There is no revenue model, and I will. But so value and sustainability go hand in hand. Everything else gets built on.
Perfect answer from Samir. So I would say, like you mentioned, going from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100. Throughout that journey, besides trying to balance social impact, customer needs, and also financial stability, like Samir said, impact or revenue, right? Through that journey, there's always a time where we might think to ourselves, especially as founders, do we preserve or do we pivot? Do we stay here or do we change? That's always a tough question to answer for startups. So, what signals or evidence should founders look for when deciding whether to stay on course or to change direction?
Okay, so there was a survey done 2018-19, still relevant by Business Standard. What are the reasons a startup fails? Right. And anybody wants to hazard a guess on what was the number one reason? I'm sure you all know. Maybe anybody wants to take a shot? Why the number one reason why a startup fails?
Team conflict.
Team conflict, not the number one, but yes. Funding, not the number one reason.
Alignment, vision, alignment among the team members.
Not the number one.
Change their purpose.
Not the number one. In fact, changing the purpose is good, pivot. But yeah, not the number one.
Financial.
No, not the number one. But some of these are obviously reasons. I'm not discarding them. There's the one and it goes. Everything else is 58%. This is 42%. Okay? Number one reason why startups fail is because they are building a product that nobody needs. That is number one. Followed closely by co-founder disagreements. Okay, team conflicts. These two are the top two reasons. When you build a product, if you're building a product that nobody needs, you are bound to fail. It's the responsibility of the founder to identify this as early as possible. How do you, as a founder, know whether you're building the right product or not? How would you do it? How do you know whether you're building the right product or not? Well, it's quite a few founders here. How do you know you're building the right product or not?
Customer validation.
Customer validation. You ask the people, I'm building this, would you use it? But yet, isn't it logical? Isn't it? I mean, all of us are nodding our heads. Yeah, just go and ask the customer whether you need this product. When do you ask this?
When?
Before building the product. Before building the product.
Not before pivoting. I'm not talking coming to pivoting, but generally, at what point of time in your life cycle do you ask the customer?
During the immersion works. During the immersion work where we do our research and whatnot, talk to the
Right.
customer.
I mean, yeah. So, but if it is so evident, right? We all agree that the earlier we ask
Yes.
our potential users, the faster we will know. If it is so obvious, then why is still 42%? Number one reason is building a product. Because founders don't ask. Yes, sir.
I think the number one reason they don't ask. Why they don't ask is because we fell in love with the idea.
Exactly.
Experience.
Amazing, right? So we are so attached to our initial hypothesis that when the customer does say no, we don't change the idea, we change the customer.
Love that.
So I want to talk to you. You're like, okay, next. You are my customer. Come, I'll take you to SEED.Lab. I will introduce you to the coaches. He's saying yes. So we get into what we call as confirmation bias. We only listen to feedback that is coming as positive or which is aligned with what we're thinking. That's a trap. If a founder is honest about listening to what the co-founder says, this problem, this when to pivot is not as big a dilemma, right? Because I am getting all the signals from my potential users that this is not what I want. Or while what you are doing, and I think this is another important thing coming back to the pivot, what you're doing is amazing. We are happy as founders to listen to that and come back home, right? We don't wait for the user to say, however, there is something which is far more painful. Can you solve that? We don't wait for it. Right? So we say, oh, is this good? Oh yeah, it's nice. I mean, to solve it, it helps me. We don't listen, is there something else that is far more painful? We don't pause to ask that question. We come back saying we have done the validation. And then when we go and deliver our product, they say, yeah, it's great, but there are other things that are far more critical. This is not what I want. You're asking me money for it. But free, I will use it. Most of us will use a lot of things for free. How many of you will use WhatsApp if they start charging you 10 ringgit a month? You'll have two thoughts about it. Right now, if I ask you how important is WhatsApp, you all say, like, very important. I can't live without it. But if tomorrow, if Meta comes and says 10 ringgit a month, oh, let's see, is there anything else? Telegram, maybe. No, right away, it won't take you barely more than a half a minute to decide, let me flip to something this week. If it was so important, how come? So we often confuse feedback coming from users as validation without understanding whether it is solving a real need. Once we do that, I think your decision to pivot out becomes that much more clear. Right? I don't know if it necessarily answers the question, but that's the signal I would look at. Number one signal is, am I listening to what my potential users are telling me about my solution? And am I solving the right problem?
No, no, I think for this SEEd.Lab test, I think, and I'm drawing this from the methodology of, I guess, Amazon working backwards, Petronas working backwards. So I'm doing iteration here on that, right? I think when to pivot, when to, and I agree with everything that Simon said, right? So this is just on top of that. Right? If you are in the situation of, oh no, should I drop this and start something new? Or should I persevere through? And I always see this with all of, I guess, the benches, right? I think if anything you get out of PWD or working backwards, the application of it, always think along the lens of that it's a valid problem. Yes, it is a valid problem. Okay, check. Is it a viable problem for me to solve? Is it still viable or not? If it's still, check. The third and the fourth one is more important, right? Is it practical for me to solve, right? Now, on the hindsight, when I say me, it's no longer individual, but you as a collective team. Do I have the right resources? Do I have the right needs? Do I have the right expertise? Right? So, yeah, all of that, right? So then, against all of that, do you have what it takes, which is the resource piece, right? So if it's really a formula, right, it's like valid times viable times practical over resource, right? If you think that you can't pull through, right, that's a valid consideration, irrespective of, yes, there's a customer needs, yes, there's a demand, whatever it is, but you can't build a solution that solves the problem that you were thinking is a valid problem. It's no longer viable. Right? So that V or second V is no longer there, right? Then yeah, okay, worth it to maybe pivot, right? So that's why I said, I know when I said last time it doesn't make much sense, it sounds like a formula for you guys. But essentially it's that, right? It's a valid problem, is it viable? Is it practical for you to do it, right? Consider all the resources that you have. That's it.
Right, that's great. Thank you so much, Samir and Daz. I think we can start to wrap up, but before that, maybe a question for each of you. What are some social enterprises that you've worked with that has truly inspired you and why? And what lessons can our early stage founders here learn from them?
Yes, I cannot say. Dah lah Malaysian. Dah lah recorded. No, I think for different. I'm not going to say this siblings because that is going to sound very biased. Outside of SEED.Lab, right, and for various reasons, right? I've worked with, some of you might know, Discover Muay Thai, only because they are passionate, right? They might not get their business model in terms of scalability that we talk about in that way, but I know they're still creating impact, right? And that's when I learned, okay, every progress is still a success. I've also worked with, I don't know if you know Accelerate Global, simply because the founder, Rawal, has the passion, the tenacity, the rigor of pulling it through in spite of the hardship. When I say hardship, she's very resilient. And I don't think she will ever pivot. But she will pull through. Remember the resource I said just now? Against the resource, she'll find resources so that she can do it, right? And if you don't know Astro Global, I think they started just before COVID. So the whole intent was to, I guess, democratize education, especially for the rural parts of youth of Malaysia. At that point of time, because it's COVID, it's very hard to do workshops and trainings and that. So what she did was, she worked with all the NGOs, collect the laptops, send the laptops to the Sabah and Sarawak because of pedalaman and all that. But she built in the modules, something like Altera Labs, built the module in the laptop so that these kids still can get education in spite of the lack of school during COVID-19, right? But she's very resilient. I like that kind of founders mindset. It's a growth mindset. Oh, I can overcome every challenge. But there are newer ones which I think among you guys as well. But to me, I believe in founders first, the authenticity, the passion, the interest for you guys are in this. Like Simon said, the business model can change, your product can change, but I think as long as you stay true, you're authentic in terms of why you're in it, I think a lot of people will gravitate towards doing it.
Yeah, so I don't know how many of you know about Tata. Right, so I spent my entire professional life as a Tata employee. It's been my 25th year, 26th year. If you don't know the story, it's the world's largest philanthropic organization, close to 70% of, and we are, Tata is a $100 billion, $120 billion conglomerate, more than 90 companies. Close to 70% of our profits go into the foundation. Right? And we see some of the greatest organizations of India have been built by the Tata. So this is fundamental research, science, the first electricity, a bunch of things. So one is the DNA itself kind of rubs off. Tata is known as a nation builder, not as a. So one is of course the pride that we have in the DNA of business with a purpose, right? Which we continue in. So often we have heard when we say we have supported by TCS Foundation. It is amazing when so many leaders say none but Tata would have done this. We don't see digital impact square coming out of any other organization but for Tata. Right? So that itself is a great endorsement. And some of our startups, I don't know, maybe many of them joined as 20-year-olds. So the average age of our co-founder cohort is 23. So these are 20, 21-year-old who had a choice to take up a job and just live a comfortable life. They chose to come into this setup engineers who had no idea what to solve. From there to in 4 years winning the President's Award, right? What creating impact is, I mean, there is no way you could have imagined that just by giving them that support, they continue to inspire us now, because long after we have stopped supporting them, we continue to take ownership of creating impact for the community and this is essentially their life. We are all in corporate, we take up jobs, we have chosen to do business. So all the co-founders who have decided to become a change maker are a source of inspiration. So that's what keeps us motivated.
Thank you so much. I hope that inspires our founders here today to continue to create impact and become change makers and to inspire others as well, even beyond the SEEd.Lab program when you graduated. So I think zooming out and having a little bit of a higher level view on things, Samir, where do you see the greatest opportunities for India-Malaysia collaboration in the realm of social innovation?
Yeah, we have some examples, but I think we call it NIMBY. I don't know how many of you know what is NIMBY. Have you heard of NIMBY? Anybody wants to give it a shot? What does NIMBY mean? It's an acronym. Not in my backyard. So not in my backyard. So a lot of us suffer from this. That if it is not something that is in my backyard that I have made, I don't want to use it. Right? So the fascination for creation over execution and impact is a barrier. But I think there is a significant opportunity again, as we discussed, in terms of the trajectory of social enterprise. India has a certain lead, right? For the last 10 years, we have a very dedicated Startup India policy. There's a lot of enablement that the government has done. There's a law, I don't know if you're aware, but in India, 5% of your profits have to go to CSR. It's a mandate. Okay. So there is a lot, from a compliance perspective, there is a need for corporates to contribute to CSR. Right? So this is, and of course we have an amazing pool of skilled people. Okay? Millions of engineers pass out every year. There are so many resources. In terms of human resource capital is extremely high in India. So startups have some inherent advantage. Startups in India have a certain inherent advantage. I think the opportunity is to, rather than trying to create everything from scratch here, why wouldn't aspiring social entrepreneurs partner with startups that are doing something very similar in India and bring that innovation here? So we have one example called Sejoli. Sejoli is from Malaysia SEEd.Lab cohort 2. They partner with, so they're working on autism. We have an incubator called Kidora, which had a 3-year head start over Sejoli, addressing the same problem. It's a very similar problem back in India. They actually partnered. So the entire technology platform of Kidora was made available to Sejoli. Sejoli actually then worked with the startup to customize it. So now Sejoli can focus on actually talking to therapists, and they spent 6 months figuring out where to find engineers to build a technology platform, whereas about 90% of the requirement were already satisfied by a startup in India. Fortunately, because they are our mentees, I could make that connection. And what would have taken them 2 years, so Sejoli 2 years to go to the market, they were able to do it in 6 months. So there's an 18-month time to impact that was saved because there was a startup that had already solved at least a technology problem. Yes, we understand there could be localization, contextualization. So I think similarly, there are a lot of agro startups. I do talk to a lot of agri startups here that are trying to solve certain problems on fertilization, like imports, advisory. India has unicorns that are doing for agri. Um, the best possible way is for you to do research, find a startup that is doing amazingly well. For the startup in India, they are looking to expand. So they are looking for partners in Malaysia, right? At the end of the day, by adopting and partnering with startups that are already done impact, you are actually, see, you claim that I want to create an impact in the life of farmers, but then you are willing to spend 3 years building your own thing. So for those 3 years, you are depriving the farmers of an impact. Right? Every day that a child does not get access to a therapist is one day lost of that child. It may not be some numbers at a higher level, but deep down we understand that. So why would you willingly, delay creating impact when somebody else is? So I think partnerships, understanding what is successful in other parts of the world. With India, at least we have the ecosystem. DISQ itself has so many startups that are working on problems that are very similar to what are the challenges here in Malaysia. I think that opportunity is there. Absolutely.
No, yeah, I agree. I don't have anything else to add. Just maybe Batutan. It's also, and I agree pretty much in Sabah. I think Sayajri Farms has a lot of onions. Those are onions, yeah. So maybe you guys can connect. So also for Tuai, he speak to Shah already. Or sorry, Anas and Shah sudah belum. Shah. So Anas is the other co-founder. So you should speak to them also. So I agree with you. I think there's a lot of knowledge or expertise or product that can be leveraged in that sense. Not necessarily export or import, but I think it should be in that. And, because irrespective of the local versions and stuff like that, product can be adopted and localized and stuff.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we can wrap up this session and we're going to open the floor to Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free. This is a safe space. Yes.
Okay, it's not a question, but something I want to share. Is it okay?
Yes.
So, I also got a good from last time from also startup. And right now I lead a lot of SMEs. So a lot of discussion earlier was about how can you deal with bigger corporates and how to approach them and all that. But I would like to add another perspective. Why not also work with smaller companies? Yes, I don't like smaller, but they're still making a few millions per year, right? So, and the keyword here is that their founders might be more open to your say your purpose of your business, whatever it may be, your social objective. And those founders in the works have the people in C-levels that you are looking for. So it's not just necessarily a direct road to that person, but look around. I mean, that's a sharing. That's all, no question. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the sharing. I have a short question. Do you think social enterprise is the right pathway to go for somebody who may have an idea that is not recognized now as solving a problem that exists, but the problem may exist a decade or more from now? Because you're talking about validation just now, right? Customers may not even know they have that problem to start with.
So let me flip it. If you are trying to solve a problem that does not exist now, you cannot be an enterprise. Because there's no bias. You could, so you could have a solution potentially, but because it's a problem that is not recognized, there are potentially no bias for that, right? There are very few, we all kind of keep on talking about what Steve Jobs said, people don't know what they want. So it's easier said than done. But then it becomes more like a research kind of a hypothesis driven experiment, right? I think fundamental starting point for enterprise, any enterprise, is their ability to identify a problem that exists now and solve it in a way that people would be willing to pay for. That's the fundamental. Any business, even if it's somebody selling street food, you identify that they're not in restaurants, they're all solving a problem. In many offices, you don't get food from home, so even a basic business is addressing a problem or a felt need for which people are willing to pay. They pay for convenience. For any kind of, we call these moonshot projects, I don't know if that's what you are referring to, these are moonshot projects. Right? Moonshot projects require a lot of funding, and an investor who believes that in 5 years or 10 years this could become a great business. But it's an investor world, pitching, not your average consumer suspect. Right? So we have startups that are looking for DNA manipulation, all of those things, really deep tech, high tech, which has no value. But then those are the investors looking at it. An average incubation program or an average funding agency is not going to be looking at. So you can't really do a company in that sense. I don't know if that answers your question. That's what I think.
No, I understand that because upon reflection. So I think, to be honest, I understand where you're going with this because you heard stories from maybe Jeff Bezos of Cadabra, for example, Amazon, right? Because at that point of time, like, who buys stuff from screen, basically? But I also seen like this is model co-working spaces. I know one of the Malaysian founders. They started like 15 years before co-working space become mainstream. Right? And then the question of resource, right? Like, how do you sustain before the market is ready to jump on that, right? So all of this is, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, right? But you've seen some instances that make it simply because either they have, that resource that's enough to sustain over time, and runway and stuff like that. Obviously, there's some tweaks and changes that you still need to do. But I think what Sami mentioned is right. Typically, practically, because if there's already demand, chances are, it's a viable business, right? But there are some outliers out there that say, oh, in 5 years, this is going to go big, or 10 years. But the question is, how do you actually, sustain before that thing goes big? It's an interesting question.
Investor.
Yeah,
Maybe it's more like indirect demand, in the sense that it's not a main demand, but the gap is there or the lack is there. Because I was thinking about how things trend, right? Like for instance, milk tea, when it becomes cheap. Of course, no one came with the idea that, I want milk tea. But there's already something within the evolution of taste that made that trend possible. So when it came in, it filled the void. Even though technically it's probably something that was introduced.
And to some entrepreneurs, we call that also sometimes it's a bit of a pivoting. Whether it's small pivot, revenue pivot, product pivot, it's because of that. Because yesterday we had a conversation, it wasn't planned when they were in the program, but suddenly someone wants to buy an IP because they created something. Right? So that's also accidental, but it wasn't planned. But yes, instances like that do happen. Right? But you're right.
Just clarifying, there's a difference between an opportunity that nobody else has seen versus an opportunity that is likely to emerge in the future. Right? So there are, for example, some examples. The really smart entrepreneurs are spotting opportunity which nobody else has. So it's right there, that nobody has really seen its opportunity. It is very different from saying in 5 years, once AI becomes mainstream, it is quite likely that every individual will have their own AI twin in the digital world, and then I want my AI twin to do the conversations on my behalf. It makes sense. But I'm not going to get invested. Nobody's going to pay money. I need an investor who believes in my vision and says, okay, I'll help you for the next 5 years till this becomes something. And willing to write it off if it's not.
So thinking the AI also developed kind of the same thing. I mean, it's been developing for decades, probably a century.
But
right?
it's always hindsight.
There's lots of money poured into it, right? But it was never profitable because there was no
Still
demand
is
for it, right? Still, probably now, we'll see. I mean, we don't know where it will actually go. And even then, what we have right now is just probably a small segment of what AI can do, because that's where the demand is and that's where most of the money is going to developing that model where that demand
So I
is.
think
So
in that context, I think the value of AI has been known for more than 40 years. We know what is singularity, what is general AI. An average machine able to understand human language. That model has been there for 40, 50 years. We did not have the technology to make it happen. The servers were not fast enough, there was not enough compute resources, all of those things. It is only now that technology is catching up to what is possible. So I think the bet was that at some point of time in the near future, technology will be able to cater to delivering this model. So the bet was made on that. It was not made on language models because of that we do not have the resources to process those language models. LLMs as a concept have been there since 1990s. MIT has a white paper on that. Just didn't know how to do it. It's a bit like I know teleportation works. I have the theory. We can, but right now I don't have the technology. I can bet on it maybe. In another 30, 40 years we might have some maverick investor like Elon Musk with OpenAI. Will they do big bets? They have the resources and the future vision. But if you ask me till 2023, everybody was still laughing at Elon Musk for investing in internet. Only once it became successful beyond hindsight, we say, oh, what a great visionary. But he was not a visionary for 15 years that his money was being used. It's a bet, and I think we only hear about bets that succeed because that's all we know. There are a million other bets that are failed. Yeah, and any other questions? Yes, sir.
Quick question, Samir.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Faris from Telecom Malaysia. So we come here with big intentions to follow what have Petronas, TCS has been doing so far. So the questions are much more into the ecosystem questions. So recently we just make a baby step into corporate innovations where we are basically on our third month of identifying our problem statement, whereby our problem statement shall be shared to the startup world, where we would like to find what kind of startup are able to solve our problems. So from our perspective, we have a really big, I would say, tough fight within our organizations, where we need to go to our procurement, to our legal, to our finance, to our GCO office, just to fight of saying that the startup are able to help us to solve this problem. So the further question that I have is basically, to what extent that we can identify this kind of startup are able to provide a solution and ready to scale up after the 12 months onwards. So that is the magic question that we need to be able to mention it out loud to our C-levels. So maybe you can give us some guidance or maybe share, maybe one also can share about how does this golden moment to identify what kind of startup shall be the right perfect fit for us. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so the first, so I think we have taken the right step by saying that we have spent time identifying problems worth solving. Okay. A lot of the times, startups are building products that nobody wants, okay, because nobody's told them what is wanted, so they make assumptions. Okay. So here we have somebody like one of the foremost telecommunication companies in Malaysia coming up with problem statements that they believe can be solved better through external innovation than going to the traditional innovation routes, the R&D route. So there must be a reason why there are tens of problems. Why have you identified these problems as something that you would want to go through an external route rather than giving it to my R&D teams to solve? That's an interesting question. Probably you have answers, you don't have to tell me. Right? That's a starting point. Okay? So why startups? Right? So essentially at the back of your mind you have a belief that startups bring certain things to the table that a regular corporate cannot. What is that? I think the answer to your question lies in that answer. What is it that a startup brings? Agility, higher risk-taking appetite, right? Not constrained by, big baggage, systems, right? Startups have certain inherent advantage which you want to leverage, essentially. I think once you have that clarity in terms of these are the 5 attributes, those are good enough for you to then say which startup needs this. Do they have a great co-founder? Do they have the right technology skills? The only thing that is preventing them from being successful is somebody like you saying, I'll give you all the resources. If resources is the only constraint, everything else is there in the startup, you can bet on them. Right? They don't, telecom is not it's a capex, right? Nothing is cheap. Everything requires so much capex, everything requires a lot of inputs. And that is essentially why there are so few telecom startups. Right? You have the opportunity to bridge that. So if the resource constraint is taken away from a startup's barriers, what can you do? So I think that's your starting. Okay, so anytime you look, I think for a startup, if I'm a startup and I'm trying to look for a challenge, see, as a small startup, I'm worried about multiple things. Okay, first and foremost is IP. In a large company, if I solve it, the company takes that IP, where do I go? Right? The second is, if I solve this problem for Telecom Malaysia, are there other buyers who are going to, because if I have only one customer, which is you, tomorrow if you stop my funding, stop buying, I'm dead as a startup. So as a founder, I need to make sure that I'm not, is it putting all my eggs in one basket? So these are the constraints from their world. Right? So I hope you understand the, right? So if you are able to address this, saying that, while you solve it for us, maybe together we can partner and sell it to Indonesia, or Thailand. Some of the really smart startup co-founders will jump at this opportunity. Right? But if you constrain them saying, you do it, but I will own the IP, you will only sell it to me, then it's a project, it is no longer a startup. So I think it's more of a mindset of how you look at it. But innovation will always follow smart people who see opportunities. So you have to show opportunities. So the right people hopefully will come. Right? So I think these are some basic barriers. You can address this. Give them the comfort that if you work with us, resources won't be a barrier. You'll be able to become a big startup. Maybe we can partner and we can go out together. What are your incentives? Because it seems like, it should not seem like it's just a one-way street, that only you are benefiting.
Who is that?
Yeah? I hope it makes sense.
Just to add on and pass on, I think you as a program owner, this is something I think you gotta think about. I think facilitating that is important because I think you're right to feel that because when we do corporate, when I do projects on corporate innovation, unfortunately the stats is against you guys. I think you guys know right. 60%, if I recall correctly, this was in 2023. 60% yang buat corporate innovation matching unsuccessful. And out of that 60%, 75% is granted because whether the expectation does not match or whatever it is, right? And I don't call it corporate innovation, I call it open innovation. Why? Because programs like you guys, I know Cradle has Bangkok University, Garage, whatever it is, it's not enough. As a program owner, you need to do more like what we do in the incubation, whether it's mentoring, coaching, because you find the solutions actually comes up from that kind of interactions. For example, your procurement jumpa ni, they can mentor a bit, they understand, they advertise a bit. I just take 1 minute of this. Interesting story. Bob Iger. Yeah, can I share the story? Actually, I can. Without telling. So Bob Iger is actually Disney, right? Walt Disney. There's this incubator program in US, right? Who had similar program, but not just incubation and stuff like that. They actually put the C-levels, including Bob, to do mentoring with some of these startups, right? The whole idea was for them to mentor and give coaching and stuff like that. So one of the startups that came in, right? They show it's a pet solution startup lah. Some balls and whatever it is for the cats. Right? They make Bob. And then Bob showed them, okay, I have this project, right? If you can solve this for me, that would be great. It was a lukisan of a character. Why he showed that? Because he thinks, although it's a pet, it can become a character of one of his upcoming series. Guess what was that character? BB-8. So the startup was for pets, for cats to play the ball and stuff like that, right? So then Bob says, okay, this is if you can solve this solution for me, right? And this is not through program, workshop, whatever, it's just by virtue of interaction of that mentoring. So they modified that ball, just put a head and a hand, and it rolls. It becomes a Star Wars character in that sense. So you see, a lot of these are very organic. So sometimes you say, yeah, it's KPI problem, but essentially, effectively, those that are it's not about the program, it's actually all the networks, the tacit knowledge that goes around that interventions, which I thought is interesting.
So give an example, in India we have Jio, Reliance Jio, the largest telecom. So they run this innovation program where they say that any startup that wants to use the Jio network, if you're a startup that you're doing for farmers, the barrier is that the cost of telecommunication is high, right? Because they have to set up some communication servers. Jio says the core value proposition for you is a telecommunication challenge, we will fund it for you. So I as a startup am struggling to scale because it requires me to have a 10,000 SIM cards for my IoT platform for let's say farmers. I don't have the funds to install 10,000 SIM cards. No bank is willing to give me to, right? Because there's no business model. What Jio says is, we will fund those 10,000 SIM cards. You don't have to pay us for the cost to use. That is their CSR. But through this simple intervention, they get access to some of the best co-founders that are working in India, who can then be enrolled into solving the problem that Jio is. So just give you a house. We have discovered many good co-founders. So first is give before you take. That model always works. We always say first, can you design a model where you're giving something and then the right people will come to take it because they see value, and then you handpick the ones that you feel can be better. Okay, that can be better. Works like a charm.
Hi Samir, hi Das. I'm Nas from Bantu Tani. We are a social enterprise that focuses on food security and improving rural economy. So I'm interested about the point that you made just now about the mindset shift from 0 to 1 and 1 to 10. We are currently, I'm not sure, but we are currently in that phase of starting from 1 to 10 mindset because we are planting onions in Sabah. So I think the box of the needs that everyone here needs onions for their food, and we are also trying to reduce dependency on import because we are currently 100% importing onions, mostly from India actually. So I just want to ask, because right now the struggle is that mindset shift from the farmer's perspective, from 1 to 10. I'm trying to industrialize the onion plantation in Sabah. So is there any advice, because I'm sure you work with a lot of farmers in India, and how do you, because like you say, it's very true. Right now they only know how to plant it. When I try to explain them, the vision and mission and the long-term goal, because I draw like a 12-year plan for them to know, but I'm struggling a bit. So I just want to know from your perspective, because I don't want to attract investment that is not needed at the moment. Because some people will approach me not just for land, but for microfinancing. I'm not sure if that's too early, or we should hold it back first until we change the mindset that we are ready to scale. So that's my question. What advice that you can share with us for like farmers in India? Thank you.
So just to repeat what you are asking is, Right now, your biggest challenge is mindset shift in the farmers.
People to industrialize it.
Understood, but farmers willing to operate as a cooperative.
Yes. But they are only expertise on the planting, right? So whenever we want to do the whole ecosystem, we struggle to.
So I'll tell you what I tell all my agro startups, who used to start up, working on pineapple as well. If you take the entire value chain of a farmer, onion, whatever it is, can you tell me one step in that journey where somebody other than a farmer takes a risk? No, in that journey of a farmer. Right? So, farmer takes all the risk. Okay, from deciding what seed to how much fertilizer to how much pesticide, they take all the risk. Okay, and they only make money after they sell. Okay. Now a startup comes and says, take one more risk. Listen to me. Farmer says, no, I'm already, So the only agri startups that have succeeded that we have seen is where they have reduced the burden of risk on the farmer. So if you can come up with a model where you say, I will bear a certain risk. The basic is don't pay me till you sell. That's the basic risk taking. So you don't have to pay me anything. Just follow what I'm asking you to do. When you sell it, you pay me for it. We call it giving credit. A 3-month credit or a 4-month. Some risk you have taken on farmers. Right? Otherwise, there is no way. How can you? Mindset is an issue. The second is you have seen a movie, okay, of some medical Grey's Anatomy or whatever it is. Can you go to a patient and say, I will give you medicine because I have seen? They will go to a doctor. You need to identify who are the farmers listening to. Who in the ecosystem is the influencer of the farmers? That if this person says do it, they will do it. Do you know somebody?
Yeah, we have one of farmers is the one who is operating the farm.
So you should not be going and talking to the farmers. They should be going and talking. At the end of the day, farming is a very trust based. Right? So I will only listen to those who I trust. So either you spend your time, effort, money in building that trust, or you partner with somebody who has that trust. So then your effort goes in convincing that one individual or that one organization. And they then do and come up with a model where the risks are distributed. Right? Because in India, at least I don't know Malaysia, but in India, 70% of the farmers are one failed crop away from poverty. One crop fails, they are below poverty line. And then on top of it, we say, no, you have to listen to my. They have far bigger things to worry about, to be honest. We are not always necessarily looking at it. In your case, I think if you have an influencer and you can bear the risk in whatever way, either by giving them credit or co-investing in something, you will see that mind. And all it requires is one successful process. It flips also very good. Once the farmer sees that by listening to your suggestion or how they were able to increase their income, they will really follow you. For that one crop cycle, can you bear that risk? Makes sense? Yeah. I know it's easier said than done, but it is what it is. So now what we are telling all our agri startups is, rather than asking for funding to subsidize a farmer, why don't you use that money to lease a 1 acre land, farm yourself, and prove that your intervention is yielding more than what? Not a rocket science. You can even hire a farmer. There are these, not everybody or every farmer owns the land. contractual farmers. Invest in lease 1 acre of land, get 2 or 3 farmers. This is where your funding should go, not in building marketing. This is not a business. Work together with the farmers. So with my intervention, we went up right next to that. A regular farmer is using traditional methods. You are using whatever you are suggesting. And my yield is 10%, 15%, and that's all it takes to convince them. Okay. Any other questions?
Any more questions? No? Alright. Okay, so I think we can wrap up today's session. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much to Samir and Daz for being our very great speakers today. Thank you so much, guys.